What if you could go back in time? What would you do? Witness the Trojan War? Check in on Cleopatra? Here's your look at the new Hasbro Indiana Jones Adventure Series Build an Artifact, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Helena Shaw. The Man in the Hat is back. Again, kids and collectors alike can imagine the heart-stopping action adventure of Indiana Jones with figures from the Indiana Jones Adventure series. With exquisite features and decoration, the series unearths the quality and realism that Indiana Jones devotees love. The Adventure series includes figures and role-play items from the 40-plus year legacy of the adventures of Indiana Jones. I wonder if Harrison Ford wished he had the Dial of Destiny before making that sequel. Before we get a closer look, though, at Helena Shaw, and we progress our way to building the Temple Skull, she has no belonging whatsoever, honestly, in this line. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. Anyways, though, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall Shaw stands. Now, funny enough, though, she has a tough time to stand, which apparently she had no problem standing in the way of that being a good Indiana Jones movie, but I digress. In the meantime, though, you're looking at the figure being about 5.5 inches in height, or she's going to be about, I would say, 14.5 centimeters tall. Let's bring in now a couple of figures for comparisons. Here's what Helena Shaw looks like with a much younger Indiana Jones, who obviously from the older state that he was in the sequel, it was kind of really hard to see older Indiana Jones just sort of stumbling around. Anyways, here's what the figure also looks like with hypnotized Indiana Jones. And maybe what I'll do is actually free up a bit of space from here and bring in Marion Ravenwood, who also, having a female body, is probably the best to compare along with Helena Shaw. In this case, I would say that Marion Ravenwood is about the same size as Helena Shaw that we're about to have a look at. Now, Shaw is a bit of an oddity to me. I can understand why Hasbro wanted to throw those characters in of an older Indy and Helena Shaw from Dial of Destiny, because obviously the new Indiana Jones movie is now in the theaters. They wanted to at least represent that somehow with figures on the pegs that people could then pick up. I feel personally, though, that Helena Shaw and the older Indy should have been separate from this wave, and I think all of the dedicated time and plastic and effort should have been put into the Adventure Series Series 2 to include characters from Temple of Doom, so that if anybody was interested just to build, for example, the skull from the temple, they wouldn't feel then forced in order to get Helena Shaw and an older Indiana Jones in order to accomplish that. Willie Scott, for example, would have been a prime contender of someone that I think could easily have belonged in this wave before we actually got to Helena Shaw. Helena Shaw and Indiana Jones should have been sold still separately. I'm not dismissing the idea that they should have not even made figures of them, but I don't think they should have packaged them along with rest of the figures that people have already been invested to get, like the Adventure series, specific to like the older trilogy. And I feel like just again to throw in characters like this, I feel is forced on their part, or forced on our part then to pick up the figures if we want to build this. Here's my rant. Let's first of all, I guess while we are on the topic of things that we can build, by the way, I can't make any more progress. I realized that with Short Round, having really the back of the skull, even though really I have like the top half of the skull and I have really then the bottom half of the skull, I actually can put them together. They're not going to be holding at all until I get the back piece that comes included with Short Round. So, for example, even like the Sankara stones that came included with Indiana Jones, I probably would be able to fit at least one of them, I would think, in the nose area. And even then, it doesn't stay well enough in place. But in order to me put in the other Sankara stones, I really probably will need to get the back piece that comes included with Short Round. So as of right now, I really didn't even need to necessarily look at Shaw next, but I figured we would get it out of the way. You know, to the credit, though, I like Dial of Destiny for what it was from an Indiana Jones standpoint. I will say, though, that the CG did take me out of a lot of the scenes where I felt like the CG just wasn't as good. And one of the things I obviously don't really care about the movie as a whole is also the fact that Phoebe Waller-Bridge was also in it as well. She wasn't as bad, I feel, as Mutt. I will say that, but I really wasn't still a big fan of her character. As for the accessories, though, that she comes included with, Shaw, for example, comes included with a tiny little torch or flashlight. The flashlight itself has been molded all in sort of a more darker silver, and they have, it looked for a second like they painted the end of it, but it might just be even the same silver plastic. I mean, looking at it the way that it is, and with the studio lights bouncing off of it, it does for a second look like it's actually illuminated, but I think it's actually just molded the same silver plastic. It does, though, fit into her hands. But again, like, I have a real problem with Shaw where she has a tough time to stand. Where obviously I'm going to delve more into that in a moment. She does hold the flashlight if you want to have her the figure displayed with that. But just the sizing of her feet, she really has poor accommodations, I feel, in order to get her to properly stand. Now, what I ended up doing, though, was that if you have yourself, say, a black stand, I'm going to mention the name of the company. We already know what stand this is from. You can, in fact, use those stands as they are using the same diameter sized peg. So we just, in fact, attach that on the bottom of her feet, and now she's not going to be going anywhere. While she isn't going anywhere, sad to say, the figure also comes included with a backpack. The backpack is nicely molded, had some additional paint also added in there as well, and this does fit over top of her back, or more on her back. To do that, I suppose right now we'll just take the stand off, we'll remove the flashlight, we'll just bring her arms back just a little bit here. You can take then the straps of the backpack provided and slide them up the forearms. I always jokingly say it's like dressing a small little toddler. I don't know how small your toddlers are. Mine certainly isn't this size, at least not anymore. And you can just put the backpack on her back and she's ready to go jack. Getting a closer look at the head sculpt for Shaw, I think it bears enough of a resemblance of Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who plays, of course, Helena in the movie. I think the likeness is pretty good. I will say, to the credit of Hasbro, they painted and sculpted the figure well. I feel like her neck is a little on the longer side. I had to go back and look at Waller-Bridge's pictures, and sure enough, Phoebe does seem to have a long neck. Maybe not the length that we are getting conveyed here as a plastic figure, but she has a pretty long neck. Really seriously go and check that out. For the rest of the outfit that she is wearing, she does have, of course, that tied up front blouse. It's made of a softer plastic. It has like a little bit of give to it. And of course, that will also help accommodate the figure's articulation, which of course we will look at more in a moment. She does also have the rolled up sleeves as well to expose a little bit of forearm. And she does also have the hands. Like, the hands themselves clearly seem to be sculpted in plastic, where it looks to be the case that they probably would have painted the sleeve over top of the plastic of the forearm. I don't think it's the other way around, because you can see like there's a little bit of white that's still left behind on top of the plastic, where like obviously it's just missed its mark a little bit. And obviously the painter, I don't know if it was actually a hand painter or a machine that painted these, but there's a little bit of paint problems. Not a lot though. She does have also the little ring there on the end of her finger. You can see there's been painted in gold, and like the lower end of her slacks, I guess you would call these trousers, are kind of more of a khaki color, a beige. And of course then she has the longer boots. Now the thing about the boots though is that the feet are very small. So as already mentioned, the figure does have, I find at least a little harder time to stand. Now, if you have any difficult time getting any one of these figures to stand, like I had a couple of problems with my indies in the earlier reviews, yeah, just use yourself a display stand of an unnamed company. We already know who that is. For the figure's articulation, going back to, once again, her head, it rotates all the way around. I'm sure some would love to be able to do this with the real thing. Rotates all the way around via ball joint. The head does look down and up and back and forth, and it does also bend and hinge at the base of the neck because there's a secondary ball joint there as well. Shoulders do come out. They're on hinges after all. Of course, you can get about 90 degrees, I would say, for Helena's articulation in the arms. Of course, they do rotate also all the way around. The figure has a single hinge only in the elbow, but that is the case as well for all the other Indiana Jones figures too. The forearm does rotate only slightly back and forth, and the hands rotate also all the way around. The upper torso is on a very good ball joint, despite the fact that she does have a tied-up front blouse, but I can bend the arms or bend the torso quite easily. Now, I don't know if she actually has a secondary ball joint. We already know and have established the fact that this part does move, but I wonder if she actually does have a secondary ball joint, because with Indiana Jones, they tend to have one at the top and one right here, and maybe it just is the case that she only has just the one. Now, when we looked at Marion Ravenwood, I'll just bring her in for a second. Marion Ravenwood also had sort of a same idea. So it might be just the case that they actually use just a single joint for the female bodies and a double joint, a double ball joint when it comes to like the male figures. Legs do split out. Once again, they're on ball joints. You can take the legs and move them forward. You can move them back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh only just a little bit. Single hinge only on the knee, but at least it allows the lower leg to rotate. And then she has, like the Indies, a hinge up and down for her ankles, and you can also rock them back and forth this way as well. As a side note, I do really like the way they've painted the boots. The dark military green and then the black on the front. Boy, those are nice looking boots. Overall, you know, again, like it's a good looking figure in the standpoint that if you like the look of, like if you want a Helena Shaw figure for your collection space. I know I'm going to be fighting with this figure falling over, so I'm just going to put her back on the display stand for right now. Yeah, the figure doesn't come with a stand, full disclosure. But if you did want to get, of course, figures based on the Dial of Destiny, I'm glad at least that Hasbro took the time to include figures. But I don't feel, this is where I stop. I feel like they could have included the figures as separate, tacked on to the Adventure series, but I don't think it should have affected the Adventure series. I think the Adventure series should have stuck with Temple of Doom, for example, and maybe instead of actually having Helena Shaw, they probably could have had some other character like maybe a Willie Scott. Willie Scott, I think, would have made more sense to be part of this wave, because now if we do get ourselves a Willie Scott, unless she's, I don't know, maybe she's going to be packed along with another figure, I think it would have made more sense just to have her part of this wave. One last time, of course, to bring in another female figure. Here's what she looks like with the Marion Ravenwood, and hey, why not? Even though it's not technically Indiana Jones, we can all pretend she's gone back in time. That's what Indiana Jones, of course, looks like also with the figure. Yeah, it's a good figure. I just don't think she necessarily belongs with this particular wave. I'm sure many of you guys are probably asking what my opinions are when it came to the Dial of Destiny. I liked the Dial of Destiny in the sense that there were aspects to the movie that felt more like an Indiana Jones movie than, say, Crystal Skull did, if that makes any sense. There were times when I was watching Crystal Skull that I was just taken completely out of it. Maybe it may have had something to do with Mutt. Maybe it would have had maybe something also just to do with the fact it just at times didn't feel like an Indiana Jones movie for me, where I felt like at times, not the whole time, Dial of Destiny felt a little more like the original trilogy of Indiana Jones movies. That said, though, I didn't like the fact that we really got an old, like, broken down Indiana Jones, and I know a lot of people really didn't like Helena Shaw in the movie. I think she was tolerable, and I'm only using quotations, bunny ear quotations behind the camera. She was tolerable. I think I might have said I liked her a little bit more than Mutt, as I'm quickly now blocking the throwing turnips at me. All in all, I think one of the biggest problems I had with Dial of Destiny was the fact that the CG that they used to the movie seemed wrong. There were a lot of times where I was looking at things that they were doing on screen, and I knew right away that nothing looked realistic. And apparently that whole time that Indiana Jones is riding the horse, that scene apparently didn't even take place. I think they actually took Indiana Jones's face and they just very messedly added it to another body. All in all, though, I think Dial of Destiny, I would say, sits around tied with Crystal Skull. Like there are things, again, I like and I don't like about both the movies that I would probably say at the end of the day that they're tied for fourth place. And that's after, I've already spoken for the trilogy. When it certainly comes, though, departing away from my opinions of the movie and talking about the figure itself, you already know my opinions on the fact that Shaw should have never been part of this set. Older Indy should have also not been included in the Adventure series. I think right away we should have just had all the main characters from Temple of Doom as being this particular wave, where then people are able to then build a Build-A-Figure, of course, a Build-A-Figure piece of an actual thing from the Temple of Doom. Why then include characters from Dial of Destiny for part of a Build-A-Figure, a BAF wave, then of a movie that they don't even belong in? Either way, though, I'm sure we will be getting ourselves a Willie Scott, whether we are going to be getting Willie as maybe, I don't know, a separate release, or maybe she's going to be packaged along with something else. Willie, for me, made the most sense to be packaged along with this wave, not, again, Helen Shaw. What do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And in the order of what you would rank Indiana Jones movies, where would you put the Dial of Destiny? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Also, as well, if you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, promise now, by the way, we will be looking at short round, because I technically do need the short round in order to complete where we've gone with the skull. And then probably after that, we will be looking at the older Indiana Jones. That's the order I'm going to be having it in. To make sure that you're not missing out on the order that I put that in, make sure, of course, you're coming back to this channel on a regular basis. Of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.